This episode of the Jiu-Jitsu Times podcast is brought to you in part by No Judges Needed BJJ Apparel and Lavender Lane CBD products. You can use the promo code JJT for 20% off your first order at No Judges Needed, and the code JJTimes20, all uppercase. Last two items are numerical for 20% off your first order of CBD products. Thank you very much for sticking with us. Enjoy the show. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Jiu-Jitsu Times podcast. I am your host, Kevin Bradley, joined as always by my co-host, Kevin Gallagher, and a very special guest today. Submission Underground has really made a name for itself during the quarantine as one of the few, not just jiu-jitsu events, but sporting events, period, to consistently put on shows, work with local government to see what needs to be done in order to make that happen. And it has been absolutely insane to watch, and they haven't slowed down. They've got an upcoming absolute banger of a card in Submission Underground 14, Craig Jones, Rocha rematch. And here to talk about it is one of the masterminds of Submission Underground, matchmaker extraordinaire, promotions expert, Heather Standing. Heather, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
The pleasure is ours. How are you doing?
I am doing as expected during the quarantine, although busy. Obviously, as you said, we got shows, so.
Everyone's got us on a microscopic scale compared to yours, but yes, we all have shows to do. I'm fine with us being in the same room on that. But before we really get into the card, I think a lot of people, this is a great opportunity to learn some more information on how promotions and events in the combat sports world are really put together, and submission grappling specifically. So if you would, could you tell us a little bit more about your role as matchmaker and your work in the promotion?
Yeah, matchmaker is probably the simplest name for my position in the company. One day Chael messaged me back in 2015, 16, I think it was, and says, hey, at the time I was matchmaking for the FCFF, which is the MMA amateur promotion that Chael also co-owns. And so he messaged me, and literally, Chael is a man of few words when he's emailing, we'll put it that way. But emailing and messaging, you kind of find yourself translating what he's trying to say in like one sentence. And he simply was like, hey, everything that you're doing for the FCFF, we want you to do it for this grappling promotion we're going to do. Are you in? And I'm like, yes, because you always say yes to Chael. But, and so I found myself matchmaking originally just the undercard. I still don't have all the connections, obviously, that he does throughout his time in the business and everything. So I was doing the undercard, and then I do all the social media promotions. Just last year, I started doing the graphic work for them as well, the graphic design work for the posters and whatnot. I do the travel arrangements. I do all the stuff that's required basically outside of production and announcing it and commentating it, really. So it's a lot, but I try to be his right-wing woman, so to speak. And so I am glad that we originally started out about 20 plus matches a card, and over the years we've narrowed it down to 10, and that's significantly better for my position as well. So yeah.
Well, the matches themselves have always been something that Submission Underground sets apart. A lot of times it's, jiu-jitsu, MMA guy, MMA guy. Metamoris was kind of doing those cross match things a little bit when they had Brendan Schaub and Cyborg that one time. Right. But you guys have really made it a marquee tentpole of the whole operation that other like Quintet famously tries to emulate some of that. I've seen. Was that a conscious effort on your guys' part to bring more MMA guys?
It was. Chael's full hope for the promotion, as he probably originally stated back in 2016, was who's the best? Is it MMA guys? Is it pure jiu-jitsu guys? And his in a perfect world, all of our matches are those kind of matches where you see jiu-jitsu purists versus MMA, as you saw with him throwing in Hallman and Rumble Johnson against Craig. I mean, Chael loves that, and so we try to do that, especially on the main card, as much as possible. And it's worked in our benefit. I mean, as recently as Richie Martinez, Boogeyman from 10th Planet, he's flat out said, like, I've wanted to be in your show for several years now, or for the last few years, so to speak, but because he's tired of going against the same style of jiu-jitsu guys, and he wants a different style coming at him. And so, we throw him in there with Shields, for God's sakes, and Vanderford, and we saw how that played out at the last show. I mean, nobody thought that Vanderford had a chance. I mean, the betting odds were insane, and life happens.
I mean, beyond, I think Kev, you can agree. Beyond us, like we've had Boogie on the show. We had him ahead of his most recent appearance on Submission Underground, and he was very complimentary of the organization.
Yeah, he's great.
Us being friendly with the dude and thinking he's a great guy aside, we would also just never bet against him on that.
Right. Oh, absolutely. I agree. I agree. I mean, I think I even privately said to Chael, I felt bad. I actually felt bad for Austin when we matched that. I was like, oh, that's kind of a jump for Austin. But he's also gone against Jake Shields, and he went into overtime with Jake Shields. So it's like, okay, and yeah, he's now Austin's kind of became like the surprise it boy, of the organization all of a sudden. So that's cool. I'm glad that we're having him come back too.
When you talk about MMA fighters in jiu-jitsu matches, like all when you're an MMA fighter for as long as it takes to get into the UFC, which is usually 7-8 years of working, like even if you're not belted up to that brown belt, black belt level, like you have that amount of knowledge of jiu-jitsu just from the fact that you have it thrown in your face all the times. The only thing that's different is that and this happens at the highest levels of jiu-jitsu too, when you have guys that have particularly trained with the mindset of MMA for an extended period of time, their timing isn't quite the same for a BJJ match. They don't have the same understanding of how to advance the position without strikes involved or without the realization that you could be hit back. So it's definitely a transition period for these guys to get up for that, which is, again, why I commend your boy for doing so well against Boogie, because I've rolled with Boogie before. I've competed against him, and he's a stud, man. He's a beast, an absolute submission machine.
Yeah, we see a lot of the MMA fighters kind of resort to a known wrestling background.
Right.
The strategy is very different. The jiu-jitsu guys are, like you said, they're playing a different game. I mean, they're aware of the strategic, side of it, as well as pacing things out, etc. Oftentimes, the MMA guys that win are actually accused of running around or stalling or whatever. Whereas in MMA, you see more of get in, get out kind of engaging. So it's really interesting to see how that plays out in the cage for Submission Underground.
Yeah, I had our guest previous this week, Rolly Delgado. We talked about that. We talked a lot about how the guard game in a lot of sense in MMA is almost dead at this point, and like aside from the absolute outliers. But even we talk percentages in that regard. So as a jiu-jitsu competitor, a lot of times their jiu-jitsu was less geared upon searching for that submission and more geared upon A, negating someone else's jiu-jitsu, and B, maintaining a positional dominance so that you can start to incorporate them strikes. So it's just a different strategical approach.
Yes. Yeah. And with us.
Oh, sorry. I was just thinking how funny it would be if you do see MMA fight. Imagine if like Craig had tried to shoot a single on Rumble though. Just
my gosh,
that would be great.
Rumble's such
I
a
keep
big
waiting
guy.
for one of those, MMA purists just to like accidentally pop him,
Well, I mean, Joe, it's fun. We had Joe Lozon on the show a little while back, and he was very blatant about saying, my mind space when I'm in the guard in an MMA match is I'm not looking to break the guard and pass. I'm just going to rain hammer fists down from inside closed guard, because what like that's what you do. And then I'm getting punched. They open the guard, and then I pass maybe, or I just stay there.
Which is again, a very legitimate use of practical jiu-jitsu in terms of self-defense or BJJ. You know, when we're talking about a Brazilian jiu-jitsu match, I talk about this all the time. Like, the idea of us having to split off into these more intricate avenues of submission approaches and more detailed techniques are very fun for us to do, particularly when we don't have to worry about getting strikes back. Because, like, in an A to B match, when you have two black belts one-on-one with one another, it's going to be very difficult to go down the very simplistic, minimalistic philosophy of positional jiu-jitsu in order to find a submission in that manner. So we have to try to trick each other with these more advanced, intricate techniques, and it's very beautiful and fun to watch. And it's just, you know, I don't think that by any means that a UFC fighter, an MMA fighter, does not have the advanced level of jiu-jitsu at all. I personally believe that pressure-oriented game has its place. And the perfect example is a guy like Jake Shields. Like, Jake Shields uses that pressure to his advantage, and it's a very systematic, formulaic approach of the most fundamental, elemental ideas of jiu-jitsu. You know, advance a position to the next position until your opponent is eventually, you know, sucked out and carried out, and until. So a lot of guys until they submission approach. So a lot of guys that are now in the jiu-jitsu scene mindset, the jiu-jitsu competition mindset, don't appreciate that because it might not be as beautiful and exciting for them, but it's still very effective.
Yes. Yeah. And that's the other problem that we have with Submission Underground is, you know, we tend to gear more towards MMA people and the MMA fans. I mean, the first time that we ever put on a Submission Underground show, it was eerie to us because Saturday night we did the amateur fights at the same venue, and it's, you know, it's sold out. People are, you know, they're drinking beers, they're yelling. I mean, you can't hear anything. Everything's just so wild. And you know, the next day we do Submission Underground and you could hear a pin drop. I mean, you could hear everything the corner said as if you were watching the UFC last weekend, you know, I mean, you could hear everything. And we're like, oh my God, do the fans hate it? You know, like, do they have, you know, and it was like, no, in jiu-jitsu, it's a different form of, you know, people are learning, they're observing, they're respecting, you know, what's happening in the cage. And so it's our job to kind of find that line of having enough excitement, you know, for the MMA fan at home, and then having, you know, the jiu-jitsu purists like Craig Jones and whatnot in there that are giving them something as well. So catering to both sides has been a balance.
I am looking forward so thoroughly to the day though where that starts to break down and we get, instead of the just bleed guy, we get the just wrist lock guy at Submission Underground, at Quintet, at the IBJJF Worlds, just like I mean, I think that more fans is a good thing, and a bigger variety is good. Although I do like quiet. I'm personally a quiet fan.
Well, it's been nice. It's been a little nice. Yeah.
Well, you know, it's funny that you bring up that crossover because that's what I was thinking about when I thought about this whole thing. And it's one of the things that I primarily think about when I think about your marketing platform. And the reason why you have these crossover matches because you have these you know, UFC versus BJJ matches because the majority of people on Fight Pass don't know who Craig Jones is. They don't know who Boogie Martinez is.
Exactly.
But they know who you know, Jake Shields is. They know who you know, all the other big name. They know who Chael Sonnen is. They know who the big name fighters. They know who Rebel Johnson is. So you get them to tune in by getting them to say, oh, wow, Rumble Johnson is going to be doing this. What is this thing? BJJ? Sure, let's check it out. You know what I mean? And hopefully the idea is they learn to appreciate the art of jiu-jitsu because you pulled them in to watch these matches. And I know Chael Sonnen. Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, I mean that's the absolute hope. I mean, when we first started Submission Underground, we were streamed out of Flow Grappling, and people hated us. You know, they didn't like Chael. They weren't amused by him. They were just like, why is this guy in our sport? You know, and they weren't amused by us putting in, you know, people that were MMA, you know, Tim Sylvia's and, you know, even John Jones. They're like, why is John Jones headlining your show? And it's like, because it's John Jones.
Right.
But they didn't care. They were just like, this is a horrible match. I mean, they didn't want to see our MMA people. And when we found a home at UFC Fight Pass, it was like, yeah, that this is where we need to be. And we, you know, there are people that are upset that we're not even doing like combat jiu-jitsu. I mean, they obviously want to see Anthony Johnson smack somebody or, you know, whatever. But it is nice to see that they're also embracing jiu-jitsu as almost like a new sport to them too.
Yeah, you
So,
know, I jiu-jitsu in general has struggled with that for a long time. You brought up the idea of combat jiu-jitsu. You brought up the idea of flow grappling, some other things. You know, they have struggled very much with getting to that mainstream market because at the end of the day, like, you know, guys like myself that have been training for decades that really appreciate and enjoy the art of jiu-jitsu, there's not a whole lot of us. You know, there's not a whole lot. And at the end of the day, you got to pay the bills, man. So in order for our sport to grow, you have to come up with ways to get people that aren't have a complete and utter understanding of all things BJJ to tune in. And you do that by these little gimmicks. They tried to do it with CJJ to incorporate, well, you know, not everybody knows what a Kimura is, but everybody knows what it means to get smacked in the face. You know, that brings people in to watch. You know, not everybody's going to know what a leg lock is, but everybody's going to say, "Oh, wow, Rumble."
But I think the problem with combat jiu-jitsu was that it ended up trying to appeal too hard. Like Submission Underground, at the end of the day, it knows what it is. No, I could be putting words in your mouth, but it feels like it knows what it is. It's not trying to blend MMA and jiu-jitsu. It's trying to showcase the jiu-jitsu in MMA by having a lot of the MMA fight. It's not trying to blend the worlds. It's like you're taking too much of two good things and incorporating various aspects that don't benefit each other. That's like it always felt like you're not getting world class striking from guys in jiu-jitsu slapping each other, you know?
Yeah.
I always had a feeling that the initial, like, from what you're saying about your initial reaction to flow, it feels like there is some part of jiu-jitsu purists that might not like the fact that even the best jiu-jitsu guy, if like in an MMA context, could get kicked in the head and then the fight's just over, you know, and then we don't get to see good jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
You know, I haven't really thought about it too much. I think that we have a lot of good promotions, and this is just one of them. And you guys are sort of the only game in town right now. And before we get into that, I would just love to talk very briefly about one of the other unique things that Submission Underground has going for it, and that is the tag team system. You know, you don't see that like incorporated a lot, and it's led to some very interesting matches. And could you tell us a little bit more about how that came to be?
Yeah, I don't want to say I'm taking credit for it, but I will take credit for it, whether good or bad right now.
It's your show, baby. Do whatever you want. You take credit whatever you want to. Go ahead.
It's almost negative to take credit for it right now after the
as of right now. Yes, it's like it's a little dicey.
Yeah, I'll take that heat though. I will. You know, I worked for a show, like a little gym smoker show back in 2013, and we did tag team jiu-jitsu at this tiny little venue, 300 people, you know, and all these big name people at the time, you know, for instance, UFC fighter Ricky Simone right now, he was one of them that did it back then. But these local big names want to do it. They're like, oh, this is so much fun. We've done something like this in the gym and practice, blah, blah. And everyone loved it. The fans loved it. The competitors loved it. I mean, we all knew it was silly. We recognized that it was kind of, you know, out there, but it just generated a lot of, you know, attention. And so I said to Chael one day, you know, we just weren't getting the excitement in the cage that we wanted. I mean, back then we were doing 8-minute matches, and now we're doing 5-minute matches at Submission Underground, which we get yelled at a lot about that. I told Chael, I said, let's try this. I mean, I went to Starbucks with him, sat down with him, and I gave him that idea and another crazy one, and he went with that one. So I brought in a few people that I knew really well that had done it at that show back in 2013. And I said, we're going to do this on the big stage. And it was great. I mean, honestly, a lot of our tag team matches were fun. We decided to incorporate the crowd, you know, to do an audience vote if there was no, you know, if it was a tiebreaker situation or no subs at all. And it was great for having energy and excitement in the crowd, because like I said before, it was just deadpan silent, you know, and So then Chael's like, oh, we got to do this on, the big names. And so he went and put 25,000 on the line. He said that on the mic, and I'm like, wow, okay. And, Craig Jones, Nicky Rod, and Vinny and Kyle. I mean, you can't go wrong with that, right? I mean, no. Vinny and Kyle wanted to get paid, and they got paid. I mean, that's...
it builds the excitement, man. Stars build excitement. That's how
I hated that night. I hated everything about it. I told Chael, I said we should have had Jake and Boogeyman be the main event. I mean, it was just, it was horrible.
Boogie will put on a show
every time,
his detriment.
Every time.
Even he's admitted in past matches where he's like, I should have probably been smarter, but this thing was so cool. And I wanted to do it. And I'm like,
he's authentic. I mean, he's exciting. He's authentic and a good guy, and people love him because he's just different, But yeah, I ran to Craig Jones after that horrible atrocity and in the parking lot, and he apologized to me. He blamed the ref. There was stuff going on, and I just was like. He tried to give Chael back his money. It was just this whole, and we're like, you'll make it up to us.
I would like to say that I feel like the heat seemed to be directed more at the athletes, Vinny, Kyle, and, Craig.
It was funny how that turned out. People, they were upset that what was funny is that the public blamed Nicky Rod for not tagging in Craig, whereas Craig messaged me 2 days prior to the show, and he's like, hey, I always show up, but I'm sick. Right. And I'm like, okay. So I'm thinking, well, great, I'm glad you're here. I didn't expect him not to even participate. That was not, that was never a thought in my mind. I wish I had known that. And he just kind of fed Nicky Rod to them, which was just a little bit too much, Yeah. It was what we saw play out. So
I've actually, it's funny you say, I've actually coached Nicky Rod before in a similar event. There was what the hell was it? The Fight Stars, the Substars event.
Substars.
It wasn't Substars.
It was Substars. They had a tag team event. It was a Substars tag team event they had. It was horrible. It was a very small, little low budget show.
Did you get paid?
Yeah, he got paid. But the point I'm trying to make is that to Nicky Rod's a benefit or appeal or whatever, he's an amazing athlete. He's an amazing jiu-jitsu
no discount
awesome.
to him. I wasn't trying to do that.
But, no. But the point is, he's also, you forget he's also a kid. He's only like 22 years old.
Well, he's still a purple belt despite the people who he's rolling with. I mean, he's rolling with incredible talent, obviously, but he is still a purple belt. And Vinny played a very strategic game, and then he threw in Kyle in overtime. And there was arguments about how Kyle complained about Nicky Rod being too sweaty, and then the ref
toweled him off. Right. Right. It's crazy. It's insane.
That ref seemed to be making a few questionable decisions during that.
Yeah. I talked to the ref on Monday. I was distraught. Like on Monday, I was like, we're ruined. I mean, I'm definitely the more dramatical, emotional one. And I was messaging. I mean, Chael literally messaged me that afternoon. He said, Heather, I need you to get off social media. He's like, go take a bath, go do something, get off the internet. Because and Chael, of course, he's the bigger picture. I'm still newer to the public, peanut gallery, and Chael's just like, hey, we're in the public eye right now. This is great. But
if you can survive all of Brazil wanting you dead, then I'm pretty sure you can survive anything.
Man, yeah.
Oh, he loves it. He lives for that stuff, I swear. But,
yeah, but I didn't think it personally. Like, I didn't think it was that atrocious of an event. There was a couple factors that I thought could have went better. I mean, again, it's difficult, particularly when you're looking in a situation like that. It's a new rule format. You have to make sure that the referee doesn't just know the rules, but it has to be a very strong-willed referee. And the point of the matter is this, is like, even if you're unsure about the rules, be sure about yourself. Don't allow the athletes to get inside of your head. Even if you make a wrong call, the rule set's different. It's new. We don't really understand it, but you know what? I'm standing firm to what I say, and that's the way it goes. Sorry, Nicky Rod or whoever else. I'm here to talk and make the call. Wrong or right, that's what we're going to do. So sit down and shut up. And it's
he's been the ref that we've used since day one. So this is his 14th one coming up here, and obviously he's been around the game for a long time. It's Dave Hagen is our ref, so he's known for judging as well at the UFC and whatnot. But it wasn't his first tag team match, but I know that there was some mistakes, and him and I talked about the next day, and his job is a very thankless one anyway, but
everybody hates.
But I was pleased with, Vinny kind of covered us a little bit on that Monday. He put out a statement, and what was crazy is that everyone was initially so mad at Vinny and Kyle for their strategic nature in the whole thing. And all of a sudden, Vinny puts out a statement, and everyone's like, "Oh, screw Craig and Nikki." I'm just gonna let you guys hash it out.
No one at their core wants to hate Vinny. He's too cool. No one in the whole game has ever just been able to ride on a move not working. Like the only other guys that can say leg locks don't work are like the Meows, and that's just because they have gelatin where their bones should be in their ankles.
Not anymore. If you look at Vinny's ankle since his last match. You
know what? I gotta tell you guys, Vinny is mad at me right now. He has been on me about. He's pissed that he's not on this show next Sunday.
No way.
Oh yeah. No, I'm not even lying to you. He has messaged me and he's like, the media can think what they want. I'm fine. He's like, I'm ready to go. I've been training. He's sending me video clips. And I'm like, Vinny, you are wild. Like, what are you doing? He was obviously in Portland the day after our event last time, and we were trying to figure out if they was going to have surgery. No surgery. Doctor sent him home.
It's insane.
He's Gumby. He's got
he's gotta stop hanging out with Tony Ferguson. That's what this tells me. 10th Planet guys need to keep Tony separated from everybody else.
That mindset.
Some guys just have that. Some guys just have those rubber legs, man, like the Meows. I know guys in the gym, but man, looking at that, rubber legs is one thing. I've never seen a leg look that bad with someone like Craig Jones. Craig Jones knows how to break a leg. Yeah, it was insane to watch it clip up like that.
Well, it's crazy. Craig even commented on a picture saying, like, what's crazy about this picture is his leg is fully broken and he's still attacking my leg. Like he
was asking the ref how much time was left because he was going to go into overtime.
He wants to go into overtime. Right?
If he gets it in the EBI overtime,
right? Because
could you imagine? Game on. He was really going to do that. I bet you if the ref had told him like 40 seconds, he would have hung out. I swear to God.
They don't
make him like Vinny.
If Vinny, like in an alternate universe, where Vinny somehow with that leg makes it to EBI overtime, there's a very non-zero chance that he wins, gets the fastest escape.
Could
whatever
you imagine?
Oh my God. All I can say is I hope there's a rematch at some point. I feel like
I think he does too. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I know that he probably wants in that tournament that we're doing next month. I'm sure he does, but Kyle wants in it too, though. Kyle Bame has been blowing up my phone trying to get in this tournament next month that we're doing. So
Kyle's such a big guy, man. He's huge. He's a monster.
It's an open weight tournament for sure.
Yeah. I made him a little uncomfortable when we had him on the show just because I kept complimenting his lats the entire time. Just because it's just they're kind of ridiculous. It looks like you're about to take flight in all your pictures. Like you could just flap your arms and just take off.
I know how big Nicky Rod is because I've been around him quite a bit.
Yes.
And there were certain parts of Kyle that almost made Nicky Rod look small. Like he looks like
he's wider. Yeah. He's wider. It's insane.
His chest and upper. And I didn't really have an understanding of how big Kyle was until you had the reference of seeing him standing next to Nicky.
I think he's 6'4" too. I think he's they were making our ref look kind of small, and Dave's tall. We've had some big boys in there.
Wasn't he a professional football player or something like that? We had him on the podcast. He did something like that. He was a professional athlete.
I know he's a model, but I don't know.
Oh, he's a model
no,
too.
I'm sorry, I'm talking about Nicky Rod.
Nikki, Nikki,
I don't know about Kyle.
We had him on the show before. I think he played he played some high level athletics before.
Yeah.
Neither of them are bigger than the biggest man in West Lynn, Oregon, but
not his arms, that's for sure.
Not his arms, biggest arms. Just each arm is the size. His right's the size of Nicky Rod, the left is the size of Kyle Babe. So
let's pivot a few seconds here and talk about something else here. Tell me a little bit about what it's like being around Chael, and I mean that in terms of like, you know, we all know Chael from the self-marketing, larger than life personality that he is.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit what it's like being with him one-on-one. Is that an actor? Is that really the person that he is a lot?
That's
I mean, an act either. You know what I mean? Is that his promotional side, right?
So I'll put it this way: my baby sister absolutely hates Chael. She thinks he's a total jerk.
Right.
You know, how could you even work with that guy? I hate him. And I just tell her, I'm like, you really think that's who I work with? You know, no, Chael is, he's charming, super funny guy, charming, a little petty. He's got a petty side to him, which I love. He's
most fighters do, by the way. It's just DNA.
Oh, I love it. He will just be petty with a smile on his face, and you all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, you know. But he's super smart, and the thing about Chael is, no matter how smart you think you are, it seems like he is somehow in some universe 10 steps ahead. You know, he literally is just always, that wheel's always turning for things that are supposed to happen in a year or two. I mean, and that's probably why he's been so successful, is that he's just putting in those puzzle pieces, you know, the whole time. But it's great, you know. He's just very smart, and he enjoys when it works in his favor. I actually, before this interview, I was watching his newest YouTube, and
those are great,
video,
by the way.
It was about Tito.
Oh boy.
and I loved it because it was probably the most authentic Chael you could probably see, because him and Tito, my God. But he's laughing and he's cackling into the camera. And he loves a good win, and Tito likes to give them to him. So
Tito's not smart. He should be nicer to him.
I've met Tito a few times. I like him. I like his girlfriend. It's whatever. But oh God, Chael just loves to have the upper hand on the quick wit. That is for sure. But no, it's great. You know, I will tell you that nothing, to my knowledge, I mean, I'm sure there is stuff behind the scenes I don't see, but nothing to my knowledge seems to phase Chael. I mean, I could give him bad news and he's like, okay, moving on, you know. When I was constantly, I'm the one that has the anxiety and the worry. And when all the quarantine started happening with the coronavirus, I mean, I'm like, Chael, I got competitors blowing up my phone. I got flights being changed and canceled. I'm like, are we really doing this? You know, and then I'm giving him all the updates from our governor every 5 seconds. You know, every time that she has a press release, I'm like, oh, she says we can only have 50 people. Oh, no, we can only have 25 people. We're not allowed to have events, period, you know? And he's just like, the show goes on, you know? He's like, you know, if you've seen that Wolf of Wall Street with Leonardo DiCaprio, that is Chael. That's Chael. The show goes on, you know?
You're going to need an army to take me out.
No, he literally, I think he had me on one of those text messages where I'd text him and he would just respond with like the same sentence, because I feel like every time I messaged him concerned about the show, he was like, let them show up in handcuffs. Let them show up in handcuffs. And I'm like, Chael, I don't want them to show up with handcuffs.
We don't want that.
And he's like, Heather, we'll be sitting in a cell together. And I said, no, we won't, because of the coronavirus, but you better be bailing me out. You know?
Right. Elon Musk definitely texted Chael advice on how to deal with the factory closing.
When I think about Chael and I think about the person that he is, I think about like a lot of the modern template for a lot of these new MMA fighters that try to like imitate him in order to get, you know, recognition, in order to get fights, in order to get more marketing for themselves. And it seems almost like it's a poor like work or a poor like professional wrestling skit when you see it. But like When I think about Chael, I think of someone that pulls it off simply because he is authentically that confident in himself, and he's authentically that's his real person. That's who he is, and it's not an act. You know?
I mean, I think there's, you know, a shtick there for sure. You know, and there's got to be to an extent, you know, for the marketing ploy with the fans, but he, you know, I mean, you know, something that has to be recognized, you know, for as much people as don't like Chael and for those that do, you know, he is successfully currently working for both UFC and Bellator and, you know, ESPN in the middle of it all. I mean, and that's I don't know anyone that really does that, you know, and he's able to appease both sides and have his own grappling promotion and still, you know, I mean, he makes it work.
Yeah,
he makes it work.
He's the master of the old cliche, you know, love me or hate me, you're still talking about me, and it still puts me out in the spotlight.
Exactly. That's Chael. Yes, exactly.
He's walked a lot. He's stretched that about as far as you can stretch it, though. Let's be honest. I'm speaking as a fan. I've also just been.
But they're still watching.
Yeah. They're still watching. They're still tuning in. They're still tuning in.
Well, let's talk briefly about you already brought up the lockdown. A lot of promotions, you know, they like Third Coast, Fight to Win, they said we gotta put everything on hold. We gotta stop.
Yeah.
And I believe you guys had a delay. Like, did you push the date back for the first event that you did was 12, right?
March 29th, yes. Submission Underground 12, yeah.
Yeah. So what was the process of getting everything squared away? I guess briefly as you can. I know you can't go into it much.
That's fine. So our home base is the Roseland Theater in downtown Portland. That's where all of our shows have been at. That's also where we do our MMA show. And we had actually had our MMA show there on March 5th, and it was a rare weekend that we did not have Submission Underground piggybacking off of it. We try to do it the same weekend, you know, Saturday and Sunday. But UFC Fight Pass, we have to work with their dates too, obviously. And so they'd given us the date of March 29th. It was really weird because we had a sold out show on March 5th with the MMA show. And then of course, everything changed in a week, you know? And we were still talking to the venue, trying to see if we could still have it, you know, when they were minimizing, you know, 100, they started out with 250 people all the way down to 0, obviously. You know, every time there was a press update, it was, you know, 25 people, whatever. And so we decided, we were like, oh, okay, we'll still have it at the venue, but we just won't have anybody there. You know, we'll just have our bare minimum staff and the competitors. And the venue got really squeamish on us. You know, they were like, you know, probably shouldn't be doing that, period. And the hotel was canceling. The hotel actually closed down, the one that we use. And next thing I know, I mean, we changed venues, I think 4 times. In a matter of 3 weeks, I mean, or less, you know. There was a call in on us. Someone found out about the venue that we had before the venue that we got. And someone called in us to the OLCC, you know, the
snitches get stitches.
Oh man, you know, people don't want you to be successful if they can't be, right? You know, and I get it, but and we've had so many people ask us, how are you doing this? How are you doing this? And you actually touched on it earlier, saying, oh, you know, we've been working with the government. No. No. We are
saying that they were working with someone, so that was just that might have been BS, or I just imagined that.
I let Chael tell that story how he wants to, but at the end of the day,
I bet it's a much better story when Chael tells it.
You just did it. You just did it. No,
you know, if Chael tells you, then we have an empty grain silo on an island somewhere.
I want to believe it.
We're currently 4 miles beneath the center of the earth, coming to you live.
He does a really good Chael, by the way.
I have a decent Chael.
Yeah, you do. That is spot on.
I just got a text from Daniel Cormier. It's crazy.
I will tell you that being around Chael, I am learning about promoting like I've never known. I mean, the business has been very disappointing on some levels, you know. Everything from discussion about fixed fights to fake text messages and whatever, but it's no, I mean, so we have a venue, and it's been the same venue for the 12th and 13th show, and then this show next weekend, of course, and I don't know if it's a grain silo. We'll put it that way. That's probably a good way to put it.
I love the marketing of it. It's clearly not. It's a room. It's not circular, but I'm not going to.
Thank you. I'm like, Chael, really? That's okay. We'll go with that.
We're currently on a moon base, a secret moon base, bringing you fights.
On my side of it, we've been very fortunate. It's been hard to matchmake because, for March 29th, people didn't want anything to do with it. I had competitors tell me left and right, no, my wife won't allow me to, or whatever, or hit me up after this whole quarantine. We had people just pulling out left and right.
Right.
And I was concerned. I was like, and then you have to trust the people that you bring in, because we don't want the government to find out where the grain silo is, and we don't and we have to honestly, like our first show that we did, and I'll disclose it, but like our first show that we did, we're caravanning people in from the hotel. They don't know the address, they don't know where it's at, even the day of the
hoods
show
on.
Oh man, I wish
like
but
the cartel.
Yeah, we're carpooling everybody in, and they don't get the itinerary until the day before. They're getting the itinerary, and they're all told, like, hey, don't check into the hotel like on your phone, Facebook check-in, Instagram check-in. Don't take videos. I yelled at the last event, I yelled at Ethan Krellinston. I probably said his name better than Chael did, but anyway, I yelled at Ethan, and I was like, dude, I'm like, you need to take down that picture on your Instagram story, because he's outside the grain silo, like doing a full panoramic. And I'm like, quarantine's not over. And he's like, oh, I'm so sorry. And he took it down. And I'm just like, Chael, I feel like an accomplice. Like
this episode is being titled "Live from the Grain Silo." I'm just putting that out there.
How concerned were you with the CDC or whatever governing bodies literally kicking the door down right in the middle of your production?
I was terrified. I will say this, like, so I first met up with them at the hotel, like on March 29th. That was our first show. It was really eerie. There was not a lot of traffic out. And of course we have 12 cars that we have to get over to the venue. And I didn't know where the venue was. I had no address, the same day of the show. And so I met up with them at the hotel. And they're like, okay, follow me. And we took the competitors in groups of 3, because I'm like, it's gonna look like a funeral procession, and that looks weird right now. So we did 3. This is a true story.
The story gets better and better as we go.
It is what it is. But we did 3 batches of bringing people over. And I had, patient 0 in my car, Craig Jones, fresh out of New York during the quarantine. Awesome.
Oh, but no.
I'm like, Chael, this is not okay. But yeah, it's fine. It's fine.
It's fine. Everything's fine.
But we get everyone over to the venue, and Kevin, who is normally the announcer, he's also co-owner, with the MMA show as well. They're business partners. I looked at Kevin and I said, you guys, he goes, what do you think? I said, you guys are geniuses. This is brilliant. It's out in the middle of, it's out in the middle of nowhere. It's, definitely SUG Island, but to a certain, Chael was just like, because I said to Chael, I said, what happens if, I'm fully, my parents, who have never watched a Submission Underground in their life, subscribed to UFC Fight Pass because they wanted to see if something popped off during the show. They wanted to be aware of it if their daughter was going to jail, and I'm like, oh my God. So there was a lot of tension that first show. And I will tell you this, after the show was over, I have never seen a more relieved Chael Sonnen than what I saw that day. He came out of his room with the, the whole bad guy ink stuff, and he comes out and he's like, we did it, you know, and we all just kind of high-fived, and it was like, you know, and now it's just like whatever. But
so he was like, was there a reason that he was the only one on commentary? Was it just that everyone was trying to keep it as few people as possible, or?
Yes, I mean, yeah. So originally, what was crazy about it was before the coronavirus stuff hit. Karen Bryant, who normally does, interviews with our people, she wasn't able to make it. She had a conflict that show, so we were going to have Paige Van Zant do it. And then Sean, who's also one of our commentators, Sean Wheelock, he had another conflict that weekend already pre-scheduled down in California. So we were kind of having a change up going on anyway for that show. And when our stuff got minimized, it was just like, Chael says, I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to sit in the chair and do it. And
why not?
Why not? Well, yeah, why not? I mean, right. You'd save some money too, and you're also staying within whatever guidelines we're trying to stay within. And the people have loved it. I mean, we've actually gotten really good feedback about him doing it that way. So we've stayed with that for these shows, and I would almost anticipate that he'll consider staying with that after as well. But it's hard to say because he does work for ESPN and they pull him a lot. I mean, there's been a couple shows where he hasn't been at. So
did you get any blowback from the Fight Pass leading up to this? Were any of them like, whoa, you can't be doing this?
None that I was aware of. Chael, as he tells the story, I mean, we
worked with who we needed to work with.
I mean, Chael's like, look, I made a commitment to these show dates and we're doing them. That's Chael, we got a lot of blowback from other companies, sponsors, we're not wanting to touch us with the 10-foot pole, which I understand too, which is it's kind of worked out the opposite way for us, though. We've gotten way more publicity and good publicity. I mean, I was kind of telling Kevin Bradley before the show that, the first show that we did in quarantine, people, I don't think expected it to happen. Nor did I, but, and so we didn't get a lot of buzz. And then once it happened, you were like, oh my God, how did Chael pull this off? And, I mean, he was on the phone with Dana White, and Dana White's going, I cannot believe that you pulled this off. But that's,
from our point of view, I was actually lucky enough to cover. I did the coverage for Submission Underground 12 for the Jiu-Jitsu Times, and the feeling in the amongst the writers and the editors was just like, does someone want to be there for it? And I'm like, I guess I'll do it if it happens. I would love it to happen, but I don't know, and then it ended up going off really well.
Yeah.
And it also was very interesting seeing everybody be quiet and Chael being able to go into the minutia of what's happening. You're able to really get into the nitty gritty of the grappling. And he's also giving backstories for, undercarders that we might not talk about in that way, which was really cool. He's he somehow got their whole life stories. Like John here, longtime wrestler, favorite color blue.
I know, it's so awesome.
What is funny is that when we bring in Sean Wheelock and Nate Quarry, to commentate, I don't really have to give notes to them. But when Chael is doing it, I give him notes I'm the one that writes down the color blue. I'm like that person that does that for him but you got to fill space. We don't have the full on announcer. I mean, our shows used to be about 2.5 hours, and they're about an hour and a half right now because we don't have, the ring girls. We don't have the announcer. We don't have this crazy walkout music, and touching up and all that stuff or whatever people do. And, so it's been a difference in timing as well for the show. And
as someone that is A, not a professional broadcaster, and B, had to do shows like that where you have to fill time, that is not easy to do. That's tough. Like you think of it, we'll just talk. You run out of things to talk about, and you're just kind of like, what? I mean, I'm a ham too. I love to talk. It's still difficult to do.
Yeah, well, and we also, because of the coronavirus, I mean, the guys are wiping down the cage mat, in between every match, and so he does have that time to fill too, and I think during that time frame, it's strictly panned on him, not on the cage. But yeah, they're wiping it down every match, so it's a process.
I mean, so you were the ones that decided on everyone's got to be full long sleeve rash guard, full spats, like that was, were you working with any health officials, or was that just like an optic decision you guys made to put people at ease?
That was a decision that was our production guy was pretty adamant about it. We've gotten some feedback on that too from some of the podcasts. I think the whole idea was that if for some reason the cops did bust down our door or whatever, that we could say that we took every single possible precaution to make it a good event, a safe event, with the exception of when they're entwined, and so even down to the warm-up areas, everyone was, required to be socially distanced. I mean, we haven't had our photographer at the last two events. We have a doctor there that pre-screens everybody when they walk in, checks their temperature, does all that stuff too. And so literally it was 2 days before the event, we already had Jake Ellenberger and Kevin Casey and those guys in town, when I got told that we needed to have long sleeve and spats and all that jazz. And I luckily am really good friends with our local fight shop people, and he opened up the store just for me and dropped about $600 and got all these outfits for the people that don't have them. I mean, Craig Jones, he's not used to, he likes to run around his little leopard print, so we had to tell me I had to wear
extra
something
short shorts.
Yeah. So
Kevin G, do we know if Nicky Rod owns any shirts? Flat out.
Only when he has to. I've
only when he has to.
Even when he is wearing a shirt, it's usually a button down that's or an extremely limited muscle tank top. He just kind of pull it off whenever he wants. He did an entire podcast with us shirtless.
It was just in his kitchen, just completely shirtless. And
I'm not going to lie to you. If I looked like Nicky Rod, I don't think I'd ever wear a shirt.
Right,
so.
Exactly. You can't fault him for that. I mean, honestly, when we did the tag team match with him and Craig, I think it was Nicky that came up to me and asked if he had to wear a shirt. And I kind of thought about it for a minute, and I was like, I don't care, because we've had guys that have gone in there without a shirt. They didn't want to wear one. And honest to God, I didn't think about that being a strategic thing at all.
Right.
And so I was like, sure, you guys can all go shirtless. I don't care. Right. So we literally had shirts and skins in there basically for the tag team, which,
all right,
we saw how that worked out.
Well, okay, just because, Kev, I know you got Florida recently reopened.
I got to teach a class,
which is great. So I want to just real quick before we end, talk about the upcoming Submission Underground card. There's a lot of great matches going on here, and before we get into them specifically, I just wanted to know if what kind of thoughts you had about putting this card together specifically.
This was an awesome card to put together. We had when we announced this show date, it was on obviously on the heels of the last two during quarantine, and everybody, we were not short on competitors wanting to compete, which was a far cry from what happened on March 29th. People were like, hey, we have nothing else going on. We want to be in there. You guys are the only show in town. And so that was cool. Craig Jones is kind of, he's basically the face of Submission Underground right now. And we're trying to find someone to beat him. I would love someone to beat him. But I thought Vinny was going to do it. But yeah, I mean, Wegner already has. And so, here we are. But, Brett Primus, we've been wanting to get him on the show for a long time. It's been hard, juggling, his Bellator, position as well. Jake Shields, Austin Vanderford, Checo, Andrew, they've all been regulars on our show. And Jordan Hawley, he obviously came in. He came in, I think it was SUG 10, and he beat Danaher Death Squad member Frank Rosenthal.
Yeah,
and that was a cool match. And
Jordan's
so I'm
an
glad to have
incredible.
him back.
He's an incredible grappler. I've seen Jordan grapple firsthand.
Insane, yeah.
And
Yeah.
Wagner's a big pick. Wagner is Wagner, man. Wagner's going to bring a show. He's going to bring a great match no matter where he goes. He comes in and he brings it every single time he competes. He's just a close friend of mine, Wagner. Not a close friend, but I know him well.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, there's been some talk about this discrepancy of the weight, and about how their original match was a few shows ago, or a few years ago, rather. And, we'll see.
Yeah, but, to Wagner's defense, and to, Craig is a bigger man, but he doesn't grapple like a big guy. In other words, he's not going to use a whole lot of pressure. He's not going to use his size isn't always a factor in the way that would influence him against a smaller guy. And
sitting in butterfly guard,
Wagner is game. He's not, believe me, there's nothing that size, none of those things are going to make any difference to him. He's really hard to submit. So difficult.
So peeled right now.
Yeah.
He looks peeled.
Well, and I'm pleased that it's the same rule set, so to speak, that they were in before. So it's, we're not going with a totally different system, So hopefully we haven't had anyone take Craig out of 3 minutes, like 2 minutes, 45 seconds, I think was the longest, and that was with Kevin Casey. Yeah.
He's a machine. I really see this match going. Wagner has a very good understanding of the leg lock game and the eccentricities, particularly when you talk about the inside heel hook that is Craig Jones' moneymaker. If you watch him, remember when he went against Gordon Ryan couldn't submit him with a lot of those inside heel hooks, and Wagner just has he's also rubber legs. He's just he just doesn't touch anything.
Well, and he respects that leg lock's work, and that's
right.
Good.
Exactly. Right. Exactly.
I love the fact that the way you were earlier talking about Craig just is like we built him up, and now like we throw everything at him, and we can't. It feels like that scene in Hercules where Hades is like, "All right, we just got to kill him," and like he keeps throwing giant monsters at Hercules.
It's
like,
the
what
monster
do I
you
do to this
created.
guy?
Throw
everything at him.
People like Craig. I mean, Craig's a likable guy, and he's obviously extremely talented. But people get tired of tuning into the same show, which is Craig Jones wins. It's like, okay. So I think everybody, no matter how great they are, they want to see them. I think all of us humanly want to see him go down. But with that said, he's still our guy, and so whether Wagner wins or not, we're still throwing Craig on the next one, and we're doing this tournament, so we still have Craig at least for the next 2 shows. I mean, by the looks of it, so.
Heather, I'm sorry, but are you sure none of this is because you guys paid him quite a big chunk of money to stand there and do nothing?
It is for me.
I'm sorry. All right,
is for me.
Well, just a lot of great matchups.
Thank you.
You'll be able to catch all of these on Fight Pass, and be sure to catch the Jiu-Jitsu Times right up afterwards. But in closing, just because both Kevin and Heather, both of you have a lot of knowledge on both these guys, and Heather, if you could step out of yourself for a moment, who do you see taking this one? Kevin, we'll start with you.
With me first, okay. So just because I love Wagner and he's my friend, and if I bet against him, he'll never talk to me again. I believe that Craig Jones has the edge, but I also think that if Wagner plays a smart game and takes it into overtime or ends up on Craig Jones's back, like Wagner is the best in the world as far as I'm concerned when he's on your back. I don't think anyone can hang with him once he gets that body triangle in, then he starts covering the mouth up and shooting the because he's mean as hell.
Yes.
And if he can get inside Craig Jones' head early and play that game and frustrate him with his inability to finish submissions, I'm gonna go with Wagner on this one just because I love him.
All right, Heather, how about you?
I'm supposed to say Wagner for marketing purposes. Like, tune in, Wagner's going to win this one. if there was betting odds, and I never bet on fights, and I don't bet on our jiu-jitsu matches, obviously. But if there were betting odds, and I was a spectator, I would go with Craig. So, and I don't have any reasons for saying that, aside from the fact that Craig just hasn't lost yet. So, it's a good bet, right? So, yeah.
I mean, personally, I'm not really sure. I'm inclined to say Jones just because we've seen him, overcome some incredible challenges. But all I know, all I know is I'm definitely gonna be watching it. That's for sure.
It's an intriguing match. It definitely is. And I understand all roads point to Craig Jones dominating this just like he does everything else. But like Wagner Rocha is definitely a game opponent that's very difficult to submit and has a few tricks up his sleeve as well. And it could turn into a good match. I'm very looking forward to it.
Yeah.
All right.
I will say one thing, and I would be remiss before we close. I just want to say one thing before we get out of here. If I have a promoter on deck that I have a free range to speak to, I would love to be on one of your shows. If you could ever find a space for me, I will pander. Okay. I don't care, and I'll be even more front and more blunt.
Kev, shut up. I'll do the work for you. All right, you want a 3-time IBJJF Masters champion? Alligator wrangling, slick son of a bitch. You got to go with Kevin Gallagher. He will bring the heat, he will bring the meat, and he will take no prisoners.
I didn't want to make it that obnoxious, but you can check me out on Flow Grapple. I got the good matches on there, and even more so than that, my absolute dream match is to have a match with Chael Sonnen, and I think I could take it to him, but we'll just leave it at that.
Everybody calls that Chael.
Yeah.
But
Chael.
I have to know, though, if you're going to ask to have a match and you're from Florida, I have to know how you feel about Carol Baskins before we make any decisions.
I will give you this real quick. I got a few minutes. I'll be late. I don't care. I actually worked in a fine dining restaurant for a long time, and I actually met her once or twice when she was the Big Cut Rescue Girl, and like she was an absolute fucking insane person in that regard. But being a person from Florida, like I know things just watching that documentary, in particular when her husband met her on that street. When they showed the footage on Nebraska Avenue, that is the street that all of the prostitutes walked on. So, like, she was 100% a prostitute. And I remember when all of these things went down. I remember being in Tampa when her husband went missing, and everyone was just like, "Oh yeah, that bitch killed him." So I'll leave it at that.
Kevin Gallagher is officially Florida man.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes,
I do know nothing to do about Florida.
All roads lead back to Kevin eventually. All right. Well, this has been a very, very, a very enjoyable episode from both of our ends. I hope of the Jiu-Jitsu Times podcast. Heather, thank you very much for blowing an afternoon hanging out with us. If there's anything that we didn't cover, Submission Underground related, or anything else related that you want to plug right now, feel free.
May 31st, Submission Underground 14. And if you think you can beat Craig Jones and 7 other people, then let me know so that we can get you in this tournament, because we got to make decisions on that pretty soon.
I'm 43. I'll take a super fight. I don't think I want any part of that. I'm not a tournament guy no more. I got one 5-10 minute match in me, and that's all I got to give you. So I'll go super hard for them 10 minutes. But then
5 minutes, no overtime.
It's like Bob Sapp. You pay me to fight for 30 seconds. After that, I'm taking a dive.
I think Baroni and Tim Sylvia both said that too. They're like, "Do we have to do the overtime?" I'm like, "Yeah."
All right, me and Kev, tag team match versus the world. We'll take on anybody.
We got them all.
Okay.
We got them all. All covered.
All right. Third place. It's at New Jersey Fed right over here. But this has been the Jiu-Jitsu Times podcast. I've been your host, Kevin Bradley, joined as always by my co-host, Kevin Gallagher, and special guest, Heather Standing. Once again, thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
And keep watching the jiu-jitsu that's coming out. Stay safe. Remember to try and support your local gyms if you can. And every day we're in this is one day closer to the end, so just keep your head up. Goodbye. We'll see you later.